And welcome to Session 3 of the Alexandria 2020 Housing Summit. I am Brandi Collins, and I will be your moderator today. I'm also a member of the Alexandria Office of Housing staff. This session will examine creative approaches to supporting and expanding affordable homeownership. Today's discussion will include the role community land trust, accessory dwelling units, first-time homebuyer programs, and common interest communities play in providing and enhancing homeownership. We'll also discuss how creativity, collaboration, and partnerships are being utilized to strengthen affordable homeownership. We are fortunate to have 4 panelists providing different perspectives from the government perspective, nonprofit, private, and even from a homeowner perspective. Our first speaker today is Bob Adams. Bob Adams is a principal with Housing and Development Advisors, a firm that provides consulting services to nonprofit, for-profit, and public sector clients in the area of affordable housing and community development. HDA provides staffing for Housing Virginia, a statewide nonprofit that works to advance affordable housing through education and policy development. HDA also manages the operations of several affordable housing providers, including the Mackey Walker Community Land Trust, which we'll hear about this afternoon. A graduate of both Yale University and Virginia Commonwealth University, Bob has worked in the affordable housing and community development field for more than 40 years at the state, local, and federal levels. Let's welcome Bob.
Let me extract this. I'll just warn you people in the back to begin with that I'm going to show some slides real quickly, and you're not going to be able to see the detail on them. So I don't know if these slides will be available through a website, but yes, so you'll be able to look at them and understand what I'm talking about. So I want to talk about the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust. It's located in Richmond. Was formed about 3 years ago, built its first house, became operational about 2 years ago, so it's relatively new. And the board established really 3 goals for the land trust: inclusive wealth building through homeownership, facilitating mixed income neighborhoods by virtue of providing permanently affordable homeownership options, and then lastly, to stabilize neighborhoods that are in decline by addressing derelict properties and also increasing affordable homeownership opportunities. So how many of you are familiar with the community land trust model, basically? Some of you. Okay, so the basic idea of a community land trust is you separate ownership of the structure, the house, from the land. The land remains owned by the CLT, a nonprofit. That land then the cost of that land is separated out from the cost of the home, so the homeowner only needs to purchase and finance the house itself. The Community Land Trust, in the case of MWCLT, enters into a 99-year lease for $100 a year to essentially give the homeowner really essential ownership of the property. The homeowner has full ownership rights. They can resell the house at any time, but the underlying lease constrains the future sales price of that home. In the case of MWCLT, we do it by limiting the amount of equity that the homeowner can get through the appreciation of the home value. In our case, it's 50% of the increase in value goes to the homeowner at the time of sale. So this is one of those charts you're going to have to study a little bit later, but this is an example of a house, and I get it that there's a bit of sticker shock in terms of the prices I'm talking about in Richmond and what you have up here in Alexandria, but in this case, a market price of a house we built, $215,000. we took out the price of the land, which in this case was $35,000. So we sold the house for $180,000. If you assume a 7% appreciation, which is definitely happening in most of the neighborhoods we're working in, 5 years from now, the market value of that house went from $215,000 to $301,000, but the sales price, the CLT sales price, just went from $180,000 to $216,000. So this is really the beauty of a community land trust, is that once it's put in motion, without additional subsidy needing to be put in, the house becomes increasingly more and more affordable as compared to the market. So we provided a benefit to the homeowner of $35,000 in year 1. In year 5, when the house is resold, we're providing a benefit to that buyer of about $85,000. So another way of looking at this is, these are using slightly different assumptions, but over time, this runs out over 25 years, 20 years, I think. The market price of the house accelerates at a much faster pace than the CLT price. That CLT price is set by a restriction in the lease with the homeowner. So the other thing that is unique about a community land trust is the governance. Most CLTs are set up with this type of board, and that's the case with the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust. A third of the board is made up of homeowners that are community land trust homeowners. A third of the board is made up of residents of the neighborhoods that the CLT is operating in. And then the final third are people like us, people who are working in the field of affordable housing, either professionals or advocates, but who play a role in affordable housing in that community. So CLTs really are community-based and community-governed, and that really makes them unique among the types of nonprofits that are doing affordable housing. So let me just show you a quick example. We needed to make the case from a public policy point of view to, in particular, the city of Richmond, that change was happening very rapidly in some of the neighborhoods in Richmond. So we looked, when we were just starting, we looked at one particular area, the east end of Richmond, rapidly gentrifying area, and looked at home sales over a 5-year period. We mapped that, and so it's a little hard to see, but just look at the blue portion of this chart. This is in 2012. This is in 2016. So just look at the what's happening with the blue. So this is home sales of $250,000 or over, and you can see how just in a period of 4 years, the volume of homes being sold in this neighborhood went from 73 homes in 2012 to 289 homes in 2016. So you get that sort of churning of real estate that happens in a neighborhood that is gentrifying. Houses are being flipped, prices are going way up. And so this, visualizing this for our policymakers was very persuasive in terms of making the case that it was the time for an intervention such as a community land trust. All right, this is even more difficult to say, but this is just to give you an idea of how rapidly this program has caught on in Richmond. We started out, as I said, built and sold the first house 2 years ago. We have sold 27 houses so far, built and sold 27 houses, and we have a total of about 50 in the pipeline. So we began working in that neighborhood that I just showed you, where there was rapid neighborhood change occurring. Right now we're working in 4 neighborhoods in the city of Richmond, but we're also working in the 2 large suburban counties, Henrico and Chesterfield that surround the city of Richmond. So it's a model that has remarkably been embraced very rapidly by policymakers and by funders. And this just gives you an idea. Again, I know there's real differences in cost here, but these are the kinds of houses we've done. We're doing rehabs of small bungalows in the city of Richmond. We have our lowest price point is $132,000 for a fully rehabilitated 900 square foot bungalow. So that's not Alexandria prices, I know. That's not even a down payment in Alexandria. So obviously at this price point, we have an extremely high level of demand for this housing. We have a long waiting list. We've also built new houses. This is a 1,600 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in that neighborhood that I described earlier, rapidly gentrifying. So it's a historic style new construction. Our sales price there, $185,000. And then this is just an example of a typical suburban house that we're now doing in the suburban counties outside of Richmond. Price point there, $155,000. Our goal to get 175 homes into the CLT program within the next 5 years. That requires capital of $12.2 million. It's our subsidy cost per house is around $70,000. We've secured about $6.1 million. That's from both public and private sources. So we're about halfway there in terms of raising the capital that we need to get to 175 homes. And one of the things that's useful to know about a community land trust is that, at least in most parts of the country, CLTs experience a much more rapid turnover of homeowners. The average is about 6 years, and it's kind of understandable because people get into a CLT house, their income goes up, they become more stable, and within a period of time, they want to get out of that house and buy a fee simple house where they can benefit from the full appreciation. So you see a lot more turnover in CLT houses, and that's actually a good thing from our point of view. If you look at the number of houses we produce over the next 20 years and the number of households we'll serve, because those houses are changing hands every six, 7 years, we end up serving more than 3 times the number of families during that period of time. So the basic question for our CLT in Richmond was, who do we want to be able to live in our community in 5 years, in 10 years? The answer to that was we want people who are working in our communities. We want people who are living there now to be able to stay. And the Community Land Trust is one tool, not the only tool, but one tool that can help us to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm sure we'll have a lot of interesting questions at the end of our session today. Our next panelist is Akeria Brown. Akeria is the Homeownership Program Administrator for Arlington County. She is responsible for implementation of the county's single-family homeownership programs. Ms. Brown has been in the affordable housing and community development industry for 12 years and is a thought leader with a passion for homeownership empowerment. With a background in asset management, she has developed strong relationships within the real estate community and serves on several advisory councils throughout the region. Ms. Brown earned dual Bachelor of Science degrees in Social and Behavioral Science and an MBA from the University of Maryland. Let's welcome Akeria.
Thanks, Brandi. Good afternoon again. I'm Akeria Brown, and I work to build moderate income homeownership opportunities for homeowners in Arlington County. And I'm going to share some of the strategies that we've implemented and continue to implement to strengthen our affordable housing opportunities and initiatives in Arlington. So in 2015, Arlington County adopted the Affordable Housing Master Plan. And this plan was to reflect the affordable housing vision, and the best two ambitious goals of this initiative was to supply affordable housing to renters and homeowners that were seeking to purchase in Arlington. The goals for this plan were that by 2040, that we would increase our rental units that are available to renters up to 60% of AMI by 17.7%, and also by 2040, that 28.4% of our new homeownership housing would be affordable to households between 80 and 120% of the area median income. So who are we serving? Ultimately, Arlington program serves a wide range of its populations, ranging from persons with no income at all to persons and families that have moderate and middle incomes. But what are our challenges? Kind of along the line of what Bob said, it's certainly sticker shock here. As you can see, the acute market demand means that prices are well beyond the means of many Arlingtonians, and that's reflected in the current prices. So this is just an indication of the average sales price for single-family homes, townhomes, condominiums, and our average rental market at this time. So we know that numerous studies have conveyed that wages have not kept up with the pace of the rise in home prices, and this presents a great challenge for us in the metropolitan region. So as it relates to best practices, Arlington really does have a strong legacy of investments in policy, choices, and supporting affordable housing. We have a very robust affordable housing investment fund. We've adopted our Affordable Housing Master Plan, as I previously stated, and we have a very strong Housing Arlington initiative that was just instituted by our county board. But we want to build upon these successes and continue to strengthen those initiatives. So the initiative that I'm going to speak on today is the Housing Arlington initiative, and as I previously stated, this was just adopted by our county board last year. And the intent of Housing Arlington is to expand the needs of the fast-growing community. So under this umbrella, there are 6 initiatives that the county board has taken on as priorities. And those priorities are intended to maintain and obtain housing affordability for everyone in the county, from our daycare workers to police officers. We know that we're going to have to explore a myriad of opportunities, look at our existing tools, try to improve those existing tools as well as others, strengthen our relationships in the private sector, philanthropic sector, and improve the policies that we currently have. And if we are successful, which we anticipate that we will be, that we will preserve and create more affordable housing in the realm of rental and homeownership opportunities. So under the umbrella of Housing Arlington are these 6 priorities: our land use tools, institutional partnerships, county employee housing, our condominium initiative, the Affordable Housing Master Plan, and our finance tools. So as it relates to our land use tools, these are the top 5 priorities for that particular initiative, and as taken as a whole, these top 5 efforts will increase the affordability throughout the county, and we also are looking for better ways to reach moderate and middle income households. For example, our missing middle study is currently underway. It's just getting started, and it's going to explore different types of housing, from duplexes to bungalows, and that's going to require zoning changes, that will require a paradigm shift, that will require us thinking about how we design, locate, regulate, and develop housing. So essentially, we know that this will be a major undertaking. Our next initiative is the Institutional Partnership Initiative. I'm really excited about this one in particular because the county has begun, in the prior session, there was some discussion about the county's relationship with partners that are in the faith-based community, but we are looking to deepen those partnerships and achieve more units. And we've been especially successful in developing those units, but we want to ensure that we look at other community-serving institutions to expand this initiative. Under our employee housing initiative, it's really, really important for us to expand opportunities for homeownership to police officers and teachers. We conducted a countywide employee survey in December of last year, and what struck me the most was that there were so many respondents that wanted to live in the county but just felt like there was absolutely no way that they would ever be able to afford it. And so what we know is that we have to build upon these tools as a way to recruit and to retain really solid and talented employees. And that's one of the things that we're undertaking in the Employee Housing Initiative. So in 2019, the overall sales average in Arlington County for all home types was a little over $700,000. And condos, the overall sales average was in the mid-400s. So what that tells us is that our existing condominium stock forms the backbone for Arlington's affordable housing ownership opportunities. So what we are undertaking in this particular initiative is providing technical assistance and management assistance to condominiums throughout the county. We're also looking for ways to leverage funds for financing for capital repairs, such as systems upgrades and replacement. And this has also afforded us the opportunity to start working directly with the city of Alexandria, who has a very well-oiled machine as it relates to their offerings for condominium education. And we've been able to partner with them to provide technical assistance to condominiums, and we hope to continue that partnership as well as explore other ways to strengthen the vitality of condos, knowing that this will likely be the most important housing stock for ownership in the foreseeable future. Okay, and under our financial tools initiative, we're looking at new ways to stretch our dollar further. So when Brandi asked me to start to talk about some of the initiatives that we have and what are some of the lessons learned, we've absolutely learned that we have to use all the tools in our wheelhouse to strengthen the impact of our existing dollars. There's no way that we will get everything done in our own silo, so it's really important for us to stretch those dollars, to attract capital that is private, and we're looking at other ways to identify different tools that would help to increase available funding. And so one of the advice elements that I would give as it relates to this process and what we've done so far and what we plan to do is to follow the plan that you have in place. And if you don't already have a plan in place, draft one, put it together, get the citizen buy-in, get people that are able to live and breathe your goals and the policy initiatives that you want to put in place in order to meet those goals. It just kind of makes me think of our prior housing director, David Christille, who would take our master plan literally everywhere he went. It was tattered and torn and worn, and it was because he was living and breathing that master plan and its elements and the indicators and the goals, and there was a considerable level of buy-in from the top down that helped to embolden staff and helped to help everyone to embrace the policies that were necessary to increase our affordable housing. And that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akeria. And our next panelist is Katharine Dixon. Katharine Dixon is president and CEO of Rebuilding Together since 2003. She came to the organization after spending many years volunteering for Rebuilding Together, Habitat for Humanity, Inova Hospital, and other community-oriented organizations. She currently sits on the Alexandria Housing Affordability Advisory Committee, and she was once the chair. She's also on the Leadership Council of Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance, the Dominion Energy Share Advisory Board, and most recently joined the DC Healthy Housing Collaborative. She is also an active member of the DC Coalition for Nonprofit Housing and Economic Development. Ms. Dixon has a degree from Loyola University and lives in Alexandria with her Great Danes and Foster Danes. Let's welcome Katharine.
Thank you. Okay, obviously this is move forward. Okay. So I'm a huge Nats fan, so I'm going to take 30 seconds of my time and do a 7-inning stretch. So if you can, just stand up where you are and just stretch yourself. We've been sitting for a long time today, so I will use the mic. Yes, but this was a visual. Okay, very good. Good job, guys. Good job. My father always told me to be who you are, so my presentation will be short and sweet. So, as Brandi said, I am with an organization called Rebuilding Together, and the program I'm going to talk to you today is our home ownership program and the creation of home ownership in partnership with the City of Alexandria. But let me just briefly review our two other programs. Our bread and butter is our Safe and Healthy program, where we will send volunteers and contractors into the homes of low-income homeowners, both here in the City of Alexandria and in DC, and provide free home repairs that address safety issues and health concerns. And in that vein, our goal is always to preserve home ownership. Another program we have is Community Strong, where we will go into neighborhoods that serve low-income residents and provide improved amenities. So here in Alexandria, our most recent project was over in the Hume Springs, Lynn Haven area. We built a large-scale food garden to address some food insecurities. We also provided the funding and the labor to build the new park, yet to be named, at 3550 Commonwealth Avenue, just across the street from the Chick Armstrong Rec Center. So those two programs are very, very near and dear to my heart. But my most favorite program is a Home of Your Own program. It is so cool and rewarding to be able to hand a first-time buyer their set of keys to their new home. So with that said, let me move on. So a Home of Your Own started, many years ago when the feds began their neighborhood stabilization program. They gave jurisdictions some funding. I am not technically inclined, as you can tell. They gave jurisdictions some funding to create homeownership opportunities, and the Office of Housing partnered with us with this neighborhood stabilization program, and we market it as a Home of Your Own. But the feds called it Neighborhood Stabilization Program. And over the course of the years, we've probably provided 35 to 40 new homes for first-time homeowners. And it is a shared equity program. The city maintains a portion of its equity when, if you sell the property, it's a very small percent. But the goal of the program is to get you into an affordable home. So, oh gosh, that is horribly tough to read. But it says that the 3 steps of our program. We acquire the property. We rehab it with volunteers and contractors who always give us discounts on their materials and labor. And then we sell the property for what we bought it for, plus the rehab cost. So if we buy a property for $200,000 and put $10,000 or $20,000 into the rehab, we're only selling it to the first-time low or moderate income buyer for those $2 amounts, purchase price plus the rehab costs. We also purchase the properties at least a 1% discount off of appraised value. So the new buyer is already walking into a home with which maybe they have equity, with what, you know what I'm trying to say. They've got equity built in. And frankly, the fact that we've been able to leverage volunteers to do some of the rehab keeps the repair costs down. So they're walking in with that equity as well. I'll get to some before and after pictures because I know everyone loves those pictures. But here is a great one. I mean, we'll go into a property that has old, bacteria-filled, wrinkled carpet, send this fabulous crew of volunteers in, and then shazam, you get freshly painted, new carpeted. This particular property may have required new windows, don't know. So the great thing for us is measuring not only the numbers, how many houses did we buy, how much finance did we leverage, how many volunteers did we engage, but it's what's the impact of the homeowner. So as you can see on this slide, those that we have surveyed over the years, 60% report that they are less stressed about money. Up here on the top left. The center box there shows that 90% of our folks are paying less on their mortgage than they were with when they were paying rent. And part of that is because when the new buyer purchases a home, the Office of Housing, in conjunction with VHDA, provides up to a $50,000 subsidy. So their mortgage may have gone, if list and rehab is $200,000, their mortgage is now based on $150,000. So it's a great, great program. As you might imagine, we don't have an endless amount of funds to buy relatively inexpensive properties here in the city. And as so many slides have shown before, the cost of housing has increased 122% to only 46% rise in household income. So these are the numbers, frankly, that warm my heart about this program. And again, just some before and after pictures. We, again, as you might imagine, we have to purchase a property and rehab it at a selling price that a low or moderate income person can afford. So none of our properties will ever be purchased at a $400,000 or even a $300,000 range, which also dictates that the majority of properties we are able to afford and rehab are condos. Back in the early days, we used to be able to afford row homes. Not so much anymore here in the city. But we'll go into a property and we will replace major mechanicals, we'll upgrade the electrical panel, we'll work on major plumbing, we will replace flooring, gut kitchens, gut bathrooms. Our goal is to make it clearly move-in ready and get the unit to a point where the new buyer does not have to spend funds on it in any upcoming years. And then, oh my gosh, yes, this was one of my favorite properties off of Pickett Street, probably 5-6 years ago, in a high-rise. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and the view off the balcony was phenomenal. But as you can tell by the picture on the left, the place was a disaster. There was not 1 inch of that unit that volunteers or contractors did not touch. But it's a gorgeous, gorgeous place, and we were able to move a family with a daughter into there, and they're still there, loving their home, and they're proud homeowners here in the city of Alexandria. So it's a small program, a small tool that we can use, but slowly but surely we increase the opportunities for homeownership in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Katharine. She's right. We wouldn't be able to do all that we do for our first-time buyers if it wasn't for the partnership we have with Rebuilding Together Alexandria. So we really appreciate that partnership. Our next panelist is Max Pastore. Max is a senior associate, urban designer, and urban planner at Roadside and Hartwell in Old Town Alexandria. At RHI, Max strives to reimagine urban and suburban areas by designing dynamic, resilient, and human-centered spaces. He has worked on urban design master plans, building design guidelines, as well as streetscape standards and guidelines throughout the Mid-Atlantic. Some of his recent local projects include urban design concepts and guidelines for Fairfax County's Richmond Highway bus rapid transit stations, updated streetscape standards for downtown Silver Spring, and conceptual streetscape alternatives for DC's Pennsylvania Avenue west of the White House. As a side project, in 2019, Max began developing a detached accessory dwelling unit in his DC backyard for his retired father. To avoid spoilers, I will allow him to share about that process during his presentation. With architecture and urban planning degrees from the University of Maryland, Max has always approached housing in the built environment from a design perspective. He is committed to evolving the region's land use to facilitate more accessible and flexible housing outcomes for everyone. Let's welcome Max.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for staying through the afternoon periods of the conference. I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Max. I work at RHI. I am an urban designer there, just down the street. Love being in Old Town and love being back in Old Town on the weekend. It's great. I'm a recent DC homeowner as of 2017 or so, and I built a backyard ADU and finished it just about a month ago, maybe less than that, for my dad. So why did I build an ADU? So a lot of reasons, but kind of the big 3 categories that I like to kind of think about it is I really wanted my dad to be closer to home, which was really important, able to achieve that through the ADU program. Wanted to, of course, as an urban planner and urban designer, try to combat my city, DC's housing crisis by adding more supply, whether it's just one small unit. And I, of course, wanted to build equity as a homeowner into my home in DC. So was I inspired by my profession? Of course I was. Did DC's by right ADU zoning help? Absolutely. But I would be lying to you if I didn't say that it was also inspired by lots of pretty photos on Pinterest and Instagram and you name it, right? So tiny living, all that stuff. But besides my obsession with tiny stuff and ADUs, was my family on board? Surprisingly, yes, actually they were. So my dad on the left, totally down for a really small unit, really big downsize. My husband, totally on board and still debatable, trying to figure out how the cat feels about it, but what are you gonna do? So that being said, we decided to do some explorations with DCRA, or the building kind of program, or building Review Permits Department in DC. Spent a lot of time there in 2018 just to kind of figure out how the legislation worked. Was able to determine, with the help of their advice, that it made the most sense for me to do a really small micro unit, basically the smallest that DC will let you do by law, 280 square feet. I wanted to do it detached in my backyard, not have it in the house, and essentially submitted that application. Luckily was able to do a lot of the work myself, having some architecture and urban planning background, but that didn't mean that it didn't take a while. It took about 5 months of reviews, just generally going back and forth with the building departments, 3 permit revision rounds, adding fire sprinklers, which was kind of a bummer, and very expensive too, and also providing things like soil erosion plans, and then also some other permits from other agencies, and generally a lot of permit fees, which I think can be improved upon, but I understand as a planner why all that needs to happen. I think, well, I was adopted, go a little bit too forward. Uh-oh. Come on. Well, it was adopted, and I'm going to show you some construction photos of what that looked like. So we started construction essentially in May of this past year, and this is what the initial construction looked like. So this is the backyard from my bathroom window, and they essentially had to dig a trench. This nice line here shows you how we got utilities to the house. Quickly, we were able to get the foundation up and running, the walls up. Here we go. And then essentially kind of got to this stage later in the fall where we were able to kind of wrap up the entire building. It was weatherproofed. Built a small little deck that we can all share between my house and my dad's new house. This is the access. We don't have an alley like many houses in DC, and we are luckily semi-detached, so we were able to have access to the front through this nice little kind of walkway and courtyard. So you can see our little 280 square foot ADU in the backyard, pending some landscape improvements this spring. This was taken quite not too long ago. These are photos of the interiors, the interior shots, pretty small space. This was over the summer before they did drywall. Again, what it looked like after drywall went in. Starting to show kind of the small little kitchen going in. It is full-size kitchen, everything you need in there, all the appliances. And this is, yay, complete interior. So essentially, this was probably a photo that I took a week and a half ago, just before my dad moved in officially. So it looks a little bit more cramped now that we're trying to figure out his kind of organizational needs and such. But so far, it worked quite well. This is the exterior. Again, pending landscape improvements, but we're pretty happy with it. Everybody so far is good with the arrangement that we've got. So generally, my takeaways for the city of Alexandria, or just generally my process as a whole, really ADUs do work well for single-family districts and zones within the DC region, particularly for Alexandria, which has a lot of high, expensive single-family homes on the market. Helps with the equity portion, incentivizes homeowners to really put in the money for projects like that, to build that equity. ADUs are really, they're not a one-size-fits-all. They're definitely market-driven in terms of an affordable, accessible housing option. That being said, they're very good for young folks. People don't need that much space. Single folks, retirees like my dad, and really incentivize and make it a lot easier for my husband and I to be closer to my dad. And when we are ready to have kids, we've got built-in childcare through multi-generational living. It's perfect. Really excited about that. That being said, because ADU legislation in terms of the zoning aspects of it, at least in DC, are relatively new. So 2016 was really when the legislation was passed. Since it hasn't been that long since they implemented it, a lot of building reviewers or a lot of permit reviewers in DC don't really know how to review them. So there's a lot of kind of discussions that you have to have as a homeowner to kind of walk them through what you're trying to do. A lot of times they haven't ever reviewed a permit like that. And unfortunately, a lot of local contractors have not also had a lot of experience working on projects like this. So you have to do a little bit of shopping and a lot of convincing, especially for fire sprinklers, to get someone to do such a small project like that. So so again, if ADUs are so great and I'm such a big supporter of them, why aren't more of them getting built? Especially in the by right jurisdictions that already allow them, which would be DC, Arlington, and now Montgomery County. Again, financing is really tricky. We are really leveraged right now because we did an ADU. Luckily, we're able to charge my dad kind of a small rent, and over time, we'll probably decrease it as our payments go down. But essentially, that can be tricky. It's also it's hard to get financing ahead of time and know what to expect and confirm that that price or the budget that you've got is going to be exactly as you think it's going to be. It's typically going to go over. And that's a big risk, especially for people who don't have the flexibility like I do of working a full-time, well-paying job. Permitting, tricky. It's really unpredictable. And also a lot of just not total institutional knowledge just yet for ADUs, particularly in DC. And marketing is kind of unclear. I know, for example, I've been to some public meetings in DC and have referenced just the term ADU. DC doesn't actually call ADUs, so they're always trying to kind of explain what that means. And especially today with the environment that we have of tiny homes and all sorts of really cool housing technology, people aren't quite clear what an EDU is. They're like, is it only a tiny home? Is it mobile? Can I Airbnb it? What is this thing? So a lot of that, I think, needs to be kind of worked out and probably will just happen over time as these become more normal, I suppose. And then my last slide, I think, is conclusions generally for the city of Alexandria. Kind of two categories. The first is definitely do, and the second is consider it. It would be great to have, sort of. The first is really you should allow for by right ADUs. I think it's worth it. I think DC is quite happy with the results they've had. Again, a lot of the negative feedback of NIMBYism, I suppose, that don't like to have ADUs in terms of having them in single-family homes is that they're going to be everywhere, but not many of them have been built in DC. And in fact, if you were to look at my house I'm lucky, my neighbors were all very supportive, and that was great. But you can't tell that it's there. It's in our backyard, and it looks like a little kind of roof pitch sort of in the back. Simplify permitting. In DC, for example, ADUs are basically looked at as single-family homes, new construction, which means they require fire sprinklers. If I were to renovate my own house, it would not need fire sprinklers. So that's something there are little things like that really start to add up. I mean, luckily, we got super lucky and we didn't need to replace our water line, but in most cases, you actually need to replace your water line to get up to the standards that the city wants you to do. So just kind of, a 250 square foot unit as opposed to a 200 or 2,000 square foot single family home, different standards maybe. And then, of course, potentially consider some pre-approved designs. Some really great work in California has been done with specifically the city of Santa Clara, I think, where they've actually done like a Sears and Roebuck style package of pre-approved plans and designs for homeowners that they've tested in the city. They've gotten community buy-in for them. People like them. All you need to do is pay somebody to place it on your site. That is a good step. Takes a lot of effort on the city's part. And then, of course, my last point, which might be a little dicey, is let developers build ADUs as part of redevelopment projects. So I just think of, in many cases, homeowners don't know how to navigate this process. Permitting's scary. But when you flip a house, and a lot of times in places like Alexandria, you will get a small little house that gets turned into a McMansion. If you allow instead for them to do an ADU or add for more units, you might not get that loss of that entry-level housing. Instead, you'll get the same house, maybe slightly bigger, with another unit in the backyard to kind of offset that. So those are the things that I would say to the city of Alexandria. With that said, I am done, I think, and open to questions.
Thank you so much, Max. As a planner, I am nerding out right now. As the mayor stated earlier, ADUs and also community land trust are recommendations in our 2013 Housing Master Plan. And this year, we're considering ADUs and CLTs are also on our short list. It's now time for Q&A. If you have a question, feel welcome to come up to one of two mics and ask questions. I will get the ball rolling and ask a question of our panelists first. My first question is for Bob. as you stated several times, Alexandria is a very high-cost market. What advice or counsel would you provide city staff and also city leaders with pursuing creating a CLT in Alexandria, given the high cost of land? And also, would you recommend that we consider maybe a rental structure versus an ownership structure?
Sure. There are plenty of CLTs around the country that also include rental housing. And I think probably more often than not, those are CLTs that are located in very high-cost areas. So it is a way for rental housing, ensure permanent affordability. I think most of our affordable rental programs in the state right now, at a minimum, have pretty long-term affordability. So you can pick up some additional permanence by going the CLT route. But I guess what I feel about CLTs is that they are really most unique when applied in a homeownership model. Mm-hmm. I know you have a terrific challenge up here with land costs. I sat in on the last session. Nina Janopol from APA talked about ways to acquire land through non-traditional methods, institutional-owned land, church-owned land, publicly owned land, land that maybe was landfill or right-of-way, or highway right-of-way, or types of land that previously weren't contemplated for use, but our technology allows us now to use that land. So there are still limited opportunities to get land at low or even no cost, and that's really what it takes. I mentioned that our average subsidy per house in Richmond in the Richmond region is $70,000. So up here, you're probably triple that or maybe quadruple that, and a big part of that is land. And so I think a key is finding really creative ways to get land into the program at a very much reduced cost.
Great, thank you. We unfortunately have time for one more question, so we'll take you, and then we're going to have to close the session.
So this is another question about the CLTs. How do you structure the taxes, the property taxes, if it's a split, kind of land versus house model?
Yeah.
And then can you talk to some of the turnover, because it sounds like a good model for building this equity through generations. Once families come in, for how long do they stay?
Yeah. So on taxes, very interesting. In most CLTs, the homeowner is responsible for the taxes on the land as well as the taxes on the structure. So that is a hard sell sometimes. We found that initially when we were first starting out, talking to the homeowner about why it was important for them to pay the taxes on the land even though they didn't own it. That problem got solved for us a couple of years ago because the General Assembly made it possible for land banks to be formed in the Commonwealth, and nonprofit organizations are eligible entities to be designated as land banks. The City of Richmond, Henrico County, and Chesterfield County all designated the Maggie Walker Community Land Trust to be its land bank. One of the benefits that goes with that is real estate tax exemption. So none of the property that's owned by the Maggie Walker CLT now is it's all tax exempt. So we've sort of been able to move past that issue of having homeowners need to pay the taxes on the land sitting under the house. Turnover, I mentioned earlier that in CLTs nationally, we see a much quicker turnover. The average tenure in a CLT house is around 6 years. That's a good thing because it allows that house to be reused and reused and reused by families that need affordable housing. So I think in that chart I showed you, we can serve 3 or 4 over 20 years. We'll serve 3 or 4 times the number of families as houses that we have put into the program. And that, I think, is one of the real benefits of CLTs that's not frequently understood, is that when we're talking about permanent affordability, it's not just for one family, it's for a whole series of families over the useful life of that house.
That is awesome. So I was just informed that we do have extra time for more questions. The other session is running behind. So are there other questions in the room? And as you're walking forward, I do have another question that I can ask Max. I am, as I said earlier, I'm nerding out over your presentation. On one side of the coin, proponents of ADUs would say, build more ADUs because it will, by virtue of increasing the supply of housing, you are decreasing the overall price of housing by the laws of supply and demand. Others would say that in order for an ADU to really contribute to affordable housing, you need to require some type of policy to make sure that those units are affordable in some way. What is your perspective on that? Do you think the market should kind of we should let the market have its way for a while, or should we attach some specific requirements to those ADUs?
Yeah, is this on?
Yes,
Okay. All right. So, yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And it's something that I kind of think about and debate about a lot, especially as I've gone through the process of building this. And I think generally, so I guess for some perspective, DC has really kind of historically considered the ADU legislation as something for wealthier neighborhoods to use to kind of infuse affordable housing potentially into high opportunity areas, kind of west of Rock Creek Park. But really haven't really considered it in terms of a wealth building tool, especially for areas like where I live is Ward 7, so east of the Anacostia River. It's, if done correctly, if the permitting is streamlined, if the process is really transparent, and I think probably tied with good, reliable, safe financing, that there could be really great opportunities for folks who have lived in my neighborhood for forever and ever who are getting nervous with the increases of their property values to cover the costs of their property taxes, to have a way to actually build wealth in their homes and to also kind of counter the property tax stuff and still get a fusion, get some extra income on the side, especially for folks who are already retired, which is a lot of people in my neighborhood as well. So that's something that I think about would be, in terms of like an easy way, or maybe that there's just some sort of financing component that the city provides that makes it easier for folks if they've lived in the neighborhood or lived in the city for a long time, those sorts of things. A more kind of radical thing that I think could be interesting, but I've kind of thrown the idea out to DC in the past, and they're like, no, that's not going to happen, is basically allowing for, in the future, subdividing properties so that the ADU itself could be either a lease to own sort of situation where it could be the new level of actual entry-level housing that you could purchase and own, and then that person could then benefit from the rising property values as well. It's not a perfect fit, but it would not therefore be an ADU after that. But, yeah.
It's a way of like getting rid of those minimum lot sizes requirements.
Yeah, that's a definite, yeah.
Thank you. You have a question, sir?
My question has to do with messaging, and I open this up to all of the speakers. One of the areas that I find to be challenging is that there's a wealth of information out concerning housing, call it the housing crisis, and it's possible for someone like me to become overwhelmed by the amount of information that comes my way. I think I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing, and I would ask you as presenters, in your respective areas, are there one or two best practices in the area of collaboration with other entities that you would want to cite either as best practices or good things that are being done so that individuals, for example, like myself, who may be contemplating being creative or taking initiative to seek to solve some problem, would not be overwhelmed by the thought that it's not possible. So my question really is, in your areas, are there one or two best practices of collaboration with other entities, be it at the municipal level, be it at the public or private corporation level, that you would be willing to share with us. Is that clear?
Sure, I can start that off. I just want to rephrase your question just so that I make sure that I understand it. It sounds like you're saying that because there's a wealth of information, you want to get some ideas of distilled housing collaboration that we've been a part of with other entities and what's actually worked and what's actually not worked. Is that primarily what your question is?
That's at the heart of it, but the unspoken part or the backstory of my question is that I have had opportunities to engage others, friends, neighbors, leaders, and et cetera. And the thought of collaborating collegially, collaboratively, in an era where it seems to be hard to seek agreement or consensus or understanding on any particular issue, is almost thought as impossible. I don't share that view, but it disturbs me that there are some who believe that positive collaboration is not possible in our day. Does that help?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you. So I can just speak a little bit about Arlington's collaboration, and it's very fitting for me to speak on Arlington's collaboration with the city of Alexandria. And I touched on it a bit earlier about our Condominium Initiative and working with condominium owners, where at this point we know that is the most viable housing home ownership option in the county. It's the most affordable. And we knew that we did not have all the answers. We knew that there was this housing stock that was aging, and we wanted to do something about it. And there's, of course, a myriad of ways that you can approach that issue. You could look at providing one-on-one subsidies. You could look at providing financial incentives to condominium boards. You could provide technical assistance. But what we did was we worked with the city of Alexandria because we knew that they had already been through they have already been to the place that we're intending to go. And so there was really no need for us to reinvent the wheel. Of course, we might have different nuances as it relates to our challenges, but with them being a well-oiled machine and there being so many lessons learned along the way, along their journey, I think it was really important for us to be able to piggyback off of what their experience was, but then also bring to bear the resources that we have and hopefully help to stretch both of our resources a little bit further. So I think when there's a collectivism mindset and you're thinking about the greater good and you're thinking about the community, you think about ways in which you can leverage what the expertise of others in order to meet the needs of the community effectively and efficiently. And I think maybe that may be some of the issue where we're not necessarily thinking about efficiency or being effective, but that's really the only way that you're going to be able to get things done and get the most out of the dollars and the resources that we currently have.
Yeah. Yes.
Real quick, one thing I really appreciate you bringing up, starting with messaging. My mentor in doing housing advocacy was a woman named Cushing Dolbear, who founded the National Income Housing Coalition. And Cushing was always fond of saying to us, you're just talking inside the bubble, inside the housing bubble. And this is really complicated work, and I think too often we fall into that pattern of not communicating in real language that is easily understood by people who don't do this work every day. I would say the best example of collaboration in the work I'm doing right now with the CLT is that pretty early on, the board of the CLT decided that it didn't need to be a nonprofit that did everything in terms of its own housing development and marketing and management. And so we have collaborated with other nonprofits who are already doing that in the Richmond region, who have the capacity to identify property, get resources from both public and private sources, build houses, sell houses, and we actually try to do as little as we can in that process and let those organizations that already have that built-in capacity do that work. Our goal is to get that house at the end of the day into the CLT program with the CLT homeowners.
That's great. And I would say that we all know there is a huge educational component to affordable housing. I think that there's a lot of collaboration and collegialism among those of us who work in this field. Where we're running into some roadblocks is within the communities where we want to build housing affordability, housing options for everyone. So many of us struggle with how do we educate the public that housing affordability does not mean crime, does not necessarily mean additional transportation challenges. Frankly, it means the opposite. The more stable housing one has, the better their outcomes are in life, from student achievement to job productivity to mental health in terms of stress about finances. So to me, it's how do we better collaborate in the neighborhoods where we want to buy or want to produce housing options for all.
Thank you, Katharine. I have one announcement. Someone lost a cell phone, and if you have lost a cell phone, it is at the check-in desk. If you've lost a phone, it's in a rose gold case. This wraps up our time. I would like to say thank you so much to Bob Adams, Akeria Brown, Katharine Dixon, and Max Pastore. Let's give them a round of applause. They provided so much information and expertise to us today. And thank you all for attending session 3. We're now going to close and make way for our closing plenary session. So please join us for that as well. Thank you.